Outside, London was a city of soot and starch. But here, under the soaring glass roof, every breath was a reminder of the far-flung territories that fueled the Crown's ambition. Eliza Finch, a woman whose 28 years had been spent largely within the hallowed, hushed archives of botanical research, did not merely observe the plants, she understood them. She knew the chemical composition of their sap, the genetic structure of their seeds, and the subtle, almost imperceptible languages they spoke, of drought, of pestilence, and of promise. She was the youngest, and by far the most gifted apprentice to Sir William Hooker, the director of Kew, and the unseen spider at the center of the world's most sophisticated network of botanical intelligence. Today, however, the air was charged not just with humidity, but with a specific electric tension. A single orchid, an orchid specimen of Cattleya labiata, the Brazilian national flower, stood on a mahogany stand, its pale mauve petals trembling slightly. It was a common, if magnificent, sight. But it was not the flower that drew the attention of the four people gathered. It was the coded message hidden beneath its terracotta pot, pressed into the damp moss like a secret heart. "The reports from Malabar are unsettling, Eliza," Sir William said, his voice a low rasp that barely disturbed the tropical silence. He was a man whose gentle love of flora belied a strategic mind sharper than any battlefield commander's. Eliza adjusted her spectacles, her eyes scanning the 4 lines of tight numerical cipher. She wore the practical, high-collared dress of a scholar, a severe concession to the era's expectations, but her fingers, stained faintly with iodine from her work on fungal diseases, moved with the precision of a master craftsman. "The figures are erratic, sir. The yield calculations for the new plantations are not adding up. They are reporting a 15% shortfall, but the environmental data suggests a harvest far exceeding that." "Precisely," a third man muttered. Lord Carrington was the Minister for Colonial Supply, a man whose hands only smelled of paper and worry. "They are lying, Miss Finch. They are systematically manipulating the data, and we are bleeding fortunes. This single commodity, which you hold in such high esteem, is costing us our supremacy." He gestured vaguely towards the orchid, but he meant the India rubber tree, Heveo brasiliensis. It was the true prize. The entire industrial future of Britain, from railway buffers and telegraph cables to the tires of the nascent motor carriages, rested entirely on a steady, affordable supply of high-grade rubber. And the entire world's supply was controlled with a zealous, almost fanatical secrecy by the Dutch and Portuguese barons in the Amazonian basin. "We need the germplasm, Eliza," Sir William stated plainly, cutting through Carrington's panic. "Not the poor seeds the local agents sneak out. We need a core sample of the highest yielding stock. We need to break their monopoly entirely." Eliza looked from the anxious minister to her mentor. Stealing the seeds was one thing. Securing their transport, ensuring their viability, and establishing a new secret plantation halfway around the globe was another entirely. This was not a botanical expedition. It was a raid. It was espionage conducted at the microscopic level. "The Amazon is guarded, sir," Eliza replied, her voice steady. "No non-native is allowed within 50 miles of the main groves. They inspect everything, cargo, clothing, even the soil in the pots. And the seeds themselves are notoriously difficult to transport. They have a short shelf life, perhaps only a few weeks once dried. They require a specific, highly controlled environment for transit. Carrington's jaw tightened, which is why we are not sending a rough-handed sailor or a boastful explorer, Miss Finch. We are sending you, because only you know how to build a world within a box. Eliza's gaze finally settled on the orchid, seeing the solution in its fragile, air-fed beauty. She knew the secret that could defeat the journey's decay. The Wardian case, a miniature, sealed glass terrarium that maintained a stable, self-regulating humidity, perfect for orchids and perhaps perfect for the seeds of empire. She was not to be a spy. She was to be a smuggler of worlds. Her mission was clear: travel undercover to a tiny, obscure port on the Malabar coast of India, a forgotten staging post of the East India Company. There, she was to rendezvous with a former colleague turned disgraced local administrator, a man with deep ties to the smuggling networks who would provide the means of entry into the inner Amazon. Her payment was in scientific immortality. Her risk, the gallows.
Outline for expansion. 2. The smuggler's bargain. Focus, setting, and initial peril. Location. The sweaty, treacherous port of Calicut, Malabar coast. Characters. Introduction of Elias Thorne, the disgraced administrator, a cynical, brilliant man haunted by his past. Conflict. Eliza realizes Thorne's local knowledge is invaluable, but his methods are dangerous and morally gray. He introduces her to the concept of the needle, a secret, heavily protected route through the interior rivers used by jewel smugglers. Fact detail. Description and function of the Wardian case, its importance in global plant exchange, and the specific challenge of Hevea seed dormancy. I3. The Amazonian labyrinth. Focus, action, and scientific challenge. Journey. The arduous, perilous journey up the Amazon's tributaries, disguised as a missionary's wife collecting local flora for a herbarium. Encounters with hostile locals and treacherous wildlife. Detailed environmental descriptions. The target. Reaching the Dutch-controlled plantation, a fortress of high fences, armed guards, and a paranoid superintendent. Scientific breakthrough. Eliza observes the plantation and realizes the seeds they need are from the older, mother trees, which are selectively protected. She must bypass the main collection area. Fact detail. The sheer economic scale of the rubber monopoly. Detailed description of the process of tapping the Hevea tree and curing the latex. I4. The harvest and the betrayal. Focus, climax, and turning point. The heist. Under the cover of a massive tropical storm, Eliza and Thorne execute the plan. They use their botanical knowledge, Thorne's is surprisingly sharp, to locate the mother trees and collect the highly perishable seeds. The discovery. They are caught by the plantation superintendent. Thorne reveals he was working a double game, intending to sell the collected seeds to a competing German syndicate for a far greater sum. The escape. Eliza uses her knowledge, specifically a highly toxic local sap she collected, to disable the superintendent and escape, but she must abandon Thorne. The crucial seeds are sealed inside the Wardian case, the life support system ticking away. I5. The legacy of the seeds. Focus, resolution, and aftermath. The race. A desperate life-or-death dash back to the coast, pursued by the cartel's river guards. The focus shifts entirely to protecting the case. The outcome. Eliza reaches the coast and the British vessel.
Of the thousands of seeds collected, only a handful, the historically accurate number is 70,000 collected, with only a few thousand survive the journey and are successfully transported to Kew. The planting. The final scene is the planting of the first Hevea seedlings at a secret nursery in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, and later Malaya. Fact detail. The astonishing result. How this small batch of smuggled seeds led to the establishment of the massive Asian rubber plantations, crushing the South American monopoly and fundamentally changing the global economy and the balance of imperial power.